Like this, that this lockdown has affected life in an unprecedented way. From logistics and transportation to people working in offices uh, to everything which is concerned with the even tempo of life has come to a standstill. But people are still working, and when they are working, they are essentially working online. Uh, Lots of issues are being faced by people due to lockdowns, but this online world has kept us alive. And while the reliance on digital and online platforms and media has increased, so have opportunistic cyber criminals taken advantage of this. In fact, Khushbu and I have written extensively during the past few days on right from how to be safe while working at home to the kind of new domain name registrations that have been happening. Khushbu, would you like to tell about that?
So, absolutely, as you rightly said that when we talk about fear is one of the key component for all the cyber criminals. They come on that. COVID is something absolutely new, and everybody wants to know about what are the cure, what exactly it is all about, where it is spreading, how it is spreading, any kind of information you want to know about. You want to buy some products, so you want to know about those things. So with this, that's kind of a food for all miscreants and anti-social elements to create a lot of things, right from phishing, right from creating fake websites, URLs, any kind of much information coming from the, or any kind of rebate coming from the government, be it any kind of monetary relief, or be it any compensation, or relief with regard to EMI, any kind of those new advisory coming in place. People are anti-social elements are actually living on that. Not just that, to an extent that yes, there have been, I mean, I think you're also aware about that, there have been attacks at uh, hospitals. So whereas not just India, but security aspect, whereas cyber world is concerned, there has been always it lags behind. So because of lack of security, and also from people working from home, it has opened a lot of lacunae, because when it comes to working from home, security aspect is slightly low compared to offices.
So,
So in that
if you
scenario,
look at
yes, there has been a rampant increase in crimes.
cyber attacks that we've seen in recent days is they range from fake COVID maps. So like everybody wants to know new COVID cases, their proliferation, how it is spreading, how we are doing in comparison to other areas, other countries. So COVID maps have been used by people, these infection maps, and cyber criminals were not behind. They have used fake COVID maps, wherein they have created these maps which basically hide an info stealer trojan behind that, and even an Android ransomware. Not only that, COVID themed fake apps which basically run some kind of a remote desktop and take over your phone or your system. They have also been found in the wild. The dark web is rife with COVID and Corona themed, phishing kits. So phishing kits are that they look like legit sites, but if you put your credentials inside, they will take away your identity. Similarly, there has been a spate of disinformation, right from as Kushbu was pointing out towards fake advisories from WHO to even government advisories to issues about lockdown, leading to a lot of chaos everywhere. Kushbu, what is the legality of it? I mean, what are the legal aspects of these new cyber attacks?
See, we can club it. We can have different aspect. If you talk about the fake news, which has been spreading all over, and there have been a rampant increase in corona related. Last 3 months, if we see, there has been a huge increase in number of FIRs being registered against, with such kind of fake information or misinformation being spread online. So the reason comes over here is, again, there can be anything. There can be a malware. There can be just a reason just to Uh, to disturb public order, or some personal gain into it, or it can be a personal animosity against somebody, so I create something. There have been few FIRs, if you look into the manner, that they were specifically like, I'll put a detail of a name and a detail and a phone number and an address of the person, and say that, yeah, he's been corona positive, COVID-19 positive. So people start social distancing them, or there has been a comes a little. This has been really start of it. Now at least these kind of things don't come up, but initially they were. So in that there are many laws, not just IPC, but we have other sections also. I'll just take a little time to talk about them. We have 5051, 5052 of Indian Penal Code, which specifically provides for punishment up to almost 3 years and a fine in case, if anybody makes or publish or circulates any statement or a humor or report which may cause fear or alarm in public or to any section of the public. Now, after this, we do even have Section 66D dedicated of IT Act, which talks about by using any means of communication device or computer resource cheats by personating. So personating, as we were talking about that, WHO, or impersonating any of the government websites or authority letter, because nowadays we see a lot of those specific letters coming from the authorities as a WhatsApp messages or on any of the other social media platform. So when we see all those messages also, that is when you personate somebody, that's a punishable offense under Section 66D. Again, almost extends to 3 years and fine up to almost 1 lakh rupees or both. Then we have Section 54. It starts actually with 52 to 58, but Section 54 of Disaster Management Act 2005, which is again very specific, which says that whoever makes or circulates a false alarm or a warning as to a disaster or a severity of a magnitude, which is leading to a panic. This again is, almost a year it extends to 1 year of a punishment and a fine. Apart from this, we have Epidemic Act, which Section 3 of Epidemic Act provides specifically that in case any authority issues a circular or any directive, if that is not abided with, in that you have a punishment under Section 188 of IPC, which is up to, I think, 6 months. So that again, we all have seen, a lot of circulars coming in that almost all the states have issued a circular that you cannot forward or create or send any information related to corona in case you have not cross-checked with the the actual source of it, or you have not confirmed that. So government actually restricted. There have been many circulars that they restricted, do not do it. And irony that also was created as a fake news, and people started putting it that no messages can be forwarded at all. Whoever forwards anything of corona is a punishable offense. So yes, or who's the admin of any of those groups is the one who will be behind the bars. So again, that was also fake news, but that created a confusion whether you can or you cannot. But yes, you cannot if you have not cross-checked with the final source or the authority. I think there are a lot of ways people are not aware, because in this panic situation, we want to know, not like, everybody wants to know. And whenever it comes from a trustworthy source, your relative, friends, you feel, yeah, it's bound to be correct. Plus you go on searching also. So I think there are a lot of measures one should take. One can check. I think you'll be better one to talk about that if we see any kind of fake news, because what we see now is our trust over the traditional media has shifted more towards this new age media, this information coming from internet. So I think how we should abstain ourselves, or how should we, abstain ourselves from being a victim of this, if you can.
I feel, what is happening is that cybercrime cuts across, all category of victims. Normally, if you look at crimes of passion, they are individual. If you look at crimes against property, they are against property, against society and state. But cybercrime is something which affects, person, property, society, state. Now, if you look at personal issues which are COVID themed in this pandemic, so people have been getting emails which are like saying that, I know your passwords, and it also tells you your password, and then it extorts money from you. It asks you to pay in Bitcoin. Similarly, there have been scams, rampant scams. There have been things which have been affecting your devices, like either ransomware locking your devices, or people getting remote access, or putting in post-dealer trojans in your devices. Similarly, there have been things like COVID theme. A friend of mine recently got a message that on his name, emails were sent everywhere, saying that I'm in a hospital, I need money. This is my online this thing Paytm account, and why don't you send money to me? So social engineering is highly contextual, and cyber criminals are making use of it. They're exploiting it. I would also like to know from you about the legalities. Let's say if I get an email like this, what do I do? Or let's say if I get a piece of fake news, I would come to the point of how, all the personal hygiene, cyber hygiene, and awareness that probably we would talk about in recommendations before closing. But I would like to know what are the legal remedies if I am subject of this. If I am somebody takes my money on a COVID themed or otherwise cybercrime, what are the remedies that I have under law?
So, as I said, there are sections. If we talk about fake information, I've already talked about the sections. When we talk about phishing or any kind of other, crimes coming in, uh, then we have 66, which is 43 of Information Technology Act does provide for a punishment.
I'm also
66.
talking of scams and frauds. I'm talking of the regular IPC things which are done.
So
Uh,
absolutely, the moment this happens, the first thing one should do is, as you're the first one to have an information with you, and at this time, take a screenshot, URL, as much information as you can, or the original device if it's possible to keep it in place. The moment this happens, be the first. Do not wait for any time. Be the first one to call on the toll-free number. If it's bank involved, do that. If it's not, bank is not involved, then do not call the ombudsman. Every bank has a toll-free number you can call on. They're absolutely working. If not, then we have a RBI's toll-free ombudsman number, which is 14440. You can do that. We have a RBI's website, which specifically provides for these kind of any banking fraud that has happened. You can upload. You can go on RBI website with I don't remember the exact URL, but they do provide state-wise, where you can register your complaint. Apart from that, you can register a complaint at your nearest police station. This time doesn't allow you. You can always call them up. You can always put an email. With the email, just that can be anyways. You can have anonymity. You cannot have anonymity, up to you. But at the same time, you have to provide a lot of details in your email as to, do upload those screenshots and URL, whatever you're talking about as to when it happened. Basic criteria as to what exactly are you complaining about and what all sources you have against that. Basic evidence which whatever you can procure.
any place where we can complain online.
Yes, cybercrime.gov.in is a place where you can access and you can register your complaints over there. Again, the same thing. It's very easy form over there. Not much of you don't even need lawyers for that. So yes, that can be done.
Could you coming to this? You also handle a lot of corporate matters. So there are very specific kind of threats which are being faced by the industry and the corporates. So business email compromise is something where the hacker basically tells you that okay, I'm in receipt of this invoice from you, and due to COVID or something, I cannot access my account number. This kindly transfer money
From
to
this
this
month.
account. Yeah. So this is called business email compromise. It's also called CEO fraud. Similarly, there are lots of attacks on infra today because people are working from home and the home environment doesn't have that kind of cyber security, device hardening, firewalls, intrusion protection system, intrusion detection system, or a SOC and SIEM. They at max have some kind of antivirus running on their devices. So work is happening, but happening in a totally unprotected environment, and a lot of business disruption can take place due to specifically due to this situation of lockdown, and also due to COVID theme attacks where we have already written that 136,000 new domain names have been registered under the name of COVID or Corona. I would like to know your views on this and the practicalities and legalities of corporate cyber attacks during COVID.
So when you talk about, yes, absolutely agreed that there have been exponential increase when it comes to registration of domain name in and around COVID, Corona, or vaccine or something. Not all of them are malicious domain names, but then reports do say that almost 6.5% domain names are related to malicious activities. That's the report coming in from relevant sources. So when we say that 6.5% are related to malicious activity, that's something one has to worry about. Why? Let's go on the point that why. What's the primary reason for coming into these kind of rise in domain name? That can be for anything. That can be for compromising the original site's target audience by serving a malware. It can be to draw readership from from original website to my website, or or to any alternative content. It can be for there have been advisory also on that people are selling mask which is not authentic one, so you don't actually get it, or vaccine or cleaning supplies and services or bogus vaccines, among a lot of other products which is corona related. Then to create confusion or spread hatred among targeted community, to get money transferred, which is very rampant, by creating identical website of the authority, government schemes, government URLs, banks. SBI has also issued, for the first time, SBI has actually sent in mails and messages to people that this is not us, do not transfer and all those things, or to trick users to, give your personal information the moment you transfer or part way with your personal information, such as banking credential or anything else, also other bank account passwords or any of those things that can be clubbed together and can be used not just now also, but it can be for future also. Now, after this being done, there, as I said, that there has been rampant increase in this scenario. 69A of Information Technology Act, which provides power to the government to block websites. So the moment you get this, CERT-in is the place you can register your complaint. You can, even if it's not against you or you have been victim, you can always inform CERT-in that something like that with, again, the URL or whatever the detail you have, you can inform CERT-in about that. CERT-in is the one under Section 69 the government has appointed in context of blocking any kind of websites or content in India. They do verify and, the authenticity of the complaint and everything, because there have been instances people make false complaints also, which can create a problem. So it's not that easy. They do look into the authenticity of your complaint, and yes, it can be done. They do instruct Department of Telecommunication after that, and also DOT with control of, ISPs, internet service providers, are functioning very well to ensure these websites and inform CERT-in about the same. The another procedure is obviously the court. You can always seek that direction, but I think that's the last one. When it comes to really fake websites where you have content about it that's fake or that's fraudulent or for some malicious activity, you can always write an email or a call to a CERT-in. Now, apart from this, there has been a lot of obligations which are coming in, and ICANN and other, all personal domain registration websites such as Namecheap or aggregator, what you call them, Namecheap or GoDaddy and Hufstad or whatever. They're also coming up with, because the kind of crimes that are coming in place, they're coming with their own self-checking mechanism. They've stopped issuing any new COVID or Corona or that related domain names, but then there can be an obligation on themselves, because when these kind of things come, I think you can tell us more with regard to that. Blocking these websites actually doesn't solve the purpose. There are, I think you will be the better person to talk about technicality into it, how one can, but at the same time, I would say that domain registrars should have more obligation, to verify. There can be an option to, do that whenever I am, let's say, buying a domain name or registering it, there can be a very authentic payment system that can be verified by them. And after that validation process, only that, either they can decline that transaction. If that verification process doesn't come from the authentic place, they can decline it. Or if it goes anonymous or non-traceable, then again, they can decline it. So that can be one
something
very
like
basic.
KYC norms.
Exactly, very strong KYC norms that can be done, so that at least I am aware about that who's registering the domain name in case tomorrow something goes against them. Yes, I would actually want to.
Yeah, please go on. Complete.
No, I would actually like to know from you when it comes to practical aspect of blocking the websites.
No, so blocking as a technical solution has limitations. So there are 2-3 things. As soon as law enforcement gets some kind of infringing content, be it social media, be it a website, then first what it does is it gives a evidence preservation notice. And unfortunately, though we are a sovereign country, but all these platforms, they say that they operate under California law. Having said so, the other procedures of letter rogatory and other legal procedures are a bit slow. But still, what works instantly is an evidence preservation notice. So you can give an evidence preservation notice, and they have to preserve evidence. After that, metadata does come, but for content, they need a retrogatory or a warrant or a court order. Blocking is simple. Blocking is comparatively simple. That there is a certain, computer emergency response team in India, which is the nodal authority designated by government to block websites. But once you block them, it is a country-specific blocking. So anybody using a VPN or a proxy has, a chance to bypass them. let me come to a tricky one. So, I'll ask you a lawyer-related thing. Recently, the New York Attorney General wrote letter to this same platform on which we are having this webinar that their security practices should be up to date, and there's a new phenomenon which is called Zoom bombing, wherein people are randomly entering Zoom meetings and sort of misbehaving. Uh, the UK government was taking some meeting on Zoom, and the Zoom ID got leaked. Similarly,
It
there
then
have
got
been
leaked. They actually put it on. They put the
yeah,
link on the.
they didn't realize
Yes.
that the meeting ID was there. After that, it seems that Zoom has also taken a lot of efforts regarding this. So I wanted to know from you as to this video conferencing facility which has been provided by a company, which is free. So, what are the aspects which businesses and individuals should take care of while utilizing these wonderful technologies?
So there's nothing called as free in this world. When it's free, there is always something behind running. There's a different business that's running behind the free, is what my analysis is. Privacy, we can talk later on this part, and how the data is being transferred or shared or sold, we can talk on. But yes, when we talk about so Zoom or any other app, any other platform, it's not just Zoom. There have been many video conferencing platforms which are facing these issues, security issues. Zoom even went on apologizing, because there have been instances not just in one or two, but there are a lot of classes which were happening, and there are some anti-social, some due to this anonymity, and there are, that I have an option to invite any third party, uh, though I'm not the host. So a lot of people entered into abused, or created a lot of havoc in the class, which led teachers in a very difficult situation. There have been a lot of different instances. Also, data was leaked. There is a breach. There's a lot of data of Zoom users available. So when we talk about me as a user base, when I do a contract or when I buy any, there is an option to even take services, buy the services. So when you buy it, you do have an obligation under the user agreement or the contract to to abide with, or to take care of my security aspect into it. And such kind of breach is absolutely punishable. I mean, one can ask for a compensation, or it can be a punishable thing. Um, when it comes to, it's not just this sector, it can be any sector. Let's just shift this space now to not just video conferencing, but something else. Let's say any other business you're doing, or let's take an example of Heathrow Airport, where a pen drive was found by one of the traveler. When then he opened the pen drive, he actually got Queen's last few months travel history, the security people with name and phone number for the future and the past, who would be taking care of their security, which is all hidden. But then, yeah, that was been there in that pen drive, which was one of the employees who were working at Heathrow Airport must have left it, and it was not protected. So when that was being found, he put it out there. There's a huge penalty, I think, in millions, which was being imposed on the airport authority, because that security measure has to be taken care by you when you're providing something. Now, when they even checked, they said that it's just 2% of the officials, or the people working, security people, are aware about the basic security or basic encryption part of it. So now I'm coming on here. When you provide me a platform, when you provide me any kind of services, security is something you have to take care about. We do have GDPR in place, which provides for punishment. We have US laws which provide for punishment. Let's wait for our data protection bill to come in place. If we look at the bill which is in current situation, there can be a penalty imposed for almost 2 to 4% of the entire turnover of that company if there is a breach at your end. So yes, the liability
You,
do come on
you,
them.
you brought in privacy now, so that is a very interesting discussion. In fact, one of the articles we wrote together was about these new contact tracing technologies to find out, any positive patients based on co-presence and their travel history as to who they would have probably infected. And there have been privacy concerns around these. Uh, Taking this further, see, uh, medical facilities are under strain, and I don't know when the personal data protection regulation in India will come up. So I wanted to take this discussion towards the data protection regime in India, privacy, the Putaswamy judgment and how COVID is impacting this whole scenario, wherein you have totally shifted to a new mode and of working, and also are using different kind of new platforms while you're giving away data. So, and also when the people are getting tested or people are getting admitted, we found that there were lists of people who were positive or who have been tested, which basically went out on internet. So what kind of data is this? What are the classes of data? And what kind of punishments can ensue? Would you please like to enlighten us?
So yeah, right to privacy, as we say, is one of the fundamental right, courtesy K. Puttaswamy versus Union of India, which made right to privacy as one of our fundamental right. Yes, it does stand. Let's understand a general principle of privacy. That is, a collection, use, or disclosure of a personal information should be only for the purpose for which it has been collected or for which a reasonable person would consider appropriate at that circumstances. So one principle comes this. Another one comes as to the individual's knowledge and meaningful consent must be obtained for collection, use, or disclosure of their personal information. The another general principle basis of privacy comes in this. The third one comes as to consent should be valid where it is reasonable to expect such individual that he understands the nature, purpose, and consequences of that collection or disclosure of personal information to which they are consenting on. So, um, so basic example here, I think we have audience as all the lawyers only, so should not be a problem. If let's say I'm selling furniture online, why do I have to actually have 10 more things of yours or access to your microphone or your camera, or selling your data out here? So there can be a very there has to be a reasonability, or there has to be a connectivity with regard to what exactly, how, why am I asking for it, and do I have an option of saying no into it? Now, whereas today's, if you recognize that what today's scenario we are looking into, the entire world is facing pandemic, and in such critical situation, my personal opinion that obtaining consent from an individual can be practically impossible or might create more of any issues. Private entities, I still have reservations here, but obtain, when it comes to state or a benefit, I feel that without any individual's consent, also it can work on. If you look at contact tracing app, which is coming in place by the government, should be absolutely occur. Any other kind of measures taken by the government at this moment, where entire world is facing pandemic, should be absolutely fine. But there are certain safeguards one has to keep in mind, as to it has to be best into the interest of the public, is what I say. Now, when it comes to any other app or government, non-government entity, when you're providing something or you're making such kind of an app, or you're into the business side of it, creating something which may take for data, then there are certain safeguards you can adopt at this time, or one or many, or as many you can, as to there should be a redress mechanism with powers to investigate. It should restrict, because I'm very sure that after this gets over, there would be exponential increase in the litigation also with regard to power of the government to privacy. I'm not now coming in the between part of it, but from here till end of it. And there have been a lot of hue and cry about privacy as of now also. So imagine when things get absolutely normal, we attain normalcy, there would be a situation. So I would say that there should be restriction and collection of usage and disclosure over public. The part where you say that that data was being available on public, or that was posted online, that again obviously goes against privacy. That should not be available. Government has restricted that. I think that now there are no personal information available. Only to an extent they do talk about that there have been 10 people in this area, but they're absolutely not disclosing your name or your personal information into it. Now, what exactly are the things I would say one should keep in mind as to when it comes to privacy, when you're having an app or anything, is accountability or identifying purposes, consent wherever it is possible, or if not possible, have a trail about it. Limiting the collection and limiting the usage of those information which you're collecting, not to be used for any other purpose, but this purpose which is specifically created for. Disclosure or retention for how much time you're doing it. It should be, it should be for specific purposes. So there has to be a clarity as to when you're deleting that data. There should be some safeguard mechanism and openness, and there should be an individual's access. Let's say, can't I have an access to my own, data? If you provide that, that should be absolutely fine. So I say desperate situation invites for desperate measures. So should be okay, but yeah, with a lot of safeguards.
I feel there are a lot of technological measures which can be taken. So while we talk of these principles, they can be built in into sort of the processes by design. For example, that encryption. Encryption can be one means. Then some kind of a transposition or anonymization of data. There has to be a sunset clause also, wherein automatically data would get deleted. Let's say that if you're interested in data of COVID patients, and for a maximum period of 30 days, and after 30 days, then the software itself, the program should have a process by which this data should be irretrievably destroyed. Similarly, if even if this process is internally sharing data with another process, so you have to ensure that these processes, while they communicate with data which is encrypted. So there is encryption at rest and data in movement. So you also have to have encryption on the communication layer. Normally, right from TLS to VPNs, they use encryption protocols, but your data itself at rest and in movement should be encrypted. Apart from that, the data which is being used, you should not be able to deobfuscate it. It should be encrypted, it should be transposed in such a way that it is anonymized, and only results can be passed on back to those agencies which basically then may require to contact individuals. So these processes, apart from the legalities, have to be built into the technicalities also, because sometimes software is made, and when software is made, these principles of design which are essential to protect privacy, they lack, and then you cannot retrofit it. So you suddenly cannot retrofit encryption into something, because if the other process will not understand. uh, for example, even this app we are talking about, so it works on a technology called WebRTC or a video bridge. Now here end-to-end encryption is not possible. Even if they want, end-to-end encryption is not possible, which is possible on any kind of your WhatsApp or other messengers, which basically use an end-to-end or peer-to-peer encryption. So when I give this call to you, it is not end-to-end encrypted. It's encrypted one way, and the keys remain on the servers of this particular company, and at least 7 of its servers are in China, and different countries have different regimes where they can compel this particular company to also part with this data. Similarly, where have you got your source code from? That there has to be transparency regarding that. For example, this very app has been made by one Ruanshi Corporation in China, and there are no details about it. So while there are legalities, these have to be built back into robust technical processes. Uh, and I think there should be education around it. There are lawyers who are listening to this. Technology is not very difficult. Try to read a bit on technology, and you would be able to then marry technology and law um, in a way that you are able to give very realistic solutions to your clients, the way Khushbu does. Uh, another contention which Khushbu I wanted to know was that with fake news is really becoming a big problem. So you saw the migrant crisis, and you saw that lynchings have taken place because of fake news being circulated about child lifting, and then these are given communal colors and create larger disturbances. So what is the responsibility of the platforms, social media platforms? Is it that they go scot-free, that it is user generated content, I have no problems, you can post anything what you want? So what is the legal regime regarding this, for content takedown, for blocking, for holding these platforms responsible, and the safe harbor under 79, I think? Please go on.
Okay. So as rightly said, they are just a platform. They are just an intermediary. They do not have any hold on information, so they can be scot free. They cannot put in, and we face a lot of issues with intermediaries, being lawyers or be law enforcement agencies. That you would also face it. That they upfront say that there are a lot of laws which they don't consider. They come from different states altogether, so they don't recognize that as something illegal or that's something as a problem. But if we put specifically the problem we are not facing now, but been facing from very long with regard to accountability or hold, how could you bring all these platforms? Uh, there has been a circular in that regard, which specifically said that within 3 days of time, these intermediaries have to respond or have to tackle to any kind of complaints coming from the LEAs. To that, there was an amendment done just exactly after a day or two or three, that that 1 day or 3 days just for them to acknowledge. So there is one simple thing that keeps on coming is the moment you file a complaint, yeah, we have acknowledged your complaint, we'll get back to you. And then it goes wrong. And when we talk about internet, the reach is so vast and so fast that ramifications are already done. By the time you get solution, or by the time you get hold or it's been taken down, the damage has already been caused. Uh, so in that scenario, it's actually a difficulty. So there should be some law that's pending, and that's over on discussion with regard to how to hold intermediaries responsible. But there should be something, in my personal opinion, that we should have some stringent position, because it's if I take it as a conventional crime or old side of crime, if I'm, let's say, I'll give a very basic example. If I have this premises and some illegal activities going on over here, and you want to enter at my place to check that, and I don't allow you, saying that it's my premises, you would come with a warrant, I have to allow you, right? If I don't, you put me also under the same, that I am part and parcel of the crime, right? Am I right on that? So why not we hold intermediary in the same? They're acting same as me holding this premises. So when I'm giving a warrant, there should be some response directly, that they should give an access to me, not hold that part of anonymity or anything, because it's not normally invading into somebody's privacy. But when it comes to any kind of crime happening, there is nothing called as privacy over there. I'm not saying that it should be allowed, it should be with everybody, but there has to be a procedure. And if it's coming via proper warrant or law enforcement agencies into it, there should be some direct mechanism. And it's not just, we as an Indian faced that problem. I think the problem which you solved, Maharashtra solved at your time with regard to pornography, child pornography, they were absolutely why can't we have that in India? So my personal view is on that. But with current situation, there has been an advisory by the ministry and also by the court that they should take care of. They should be very, very vigilant at this time with any kind of information or any hatred or any misinformation happening with regard to corona, and they should take it down at an immediate basis. And they should also impose a lot of more internal security checks on that. If something like that is happening, they should take care of that. So that advisory, and there has been a guideline by the Supreme Court also on that. If we talk just about this specific period, pandemic period.
Right. There have been also some measures by the platforms themselves, like WhatsApp has restricted the number of forwards.
Absolutely.
Plus, I think another
fact checking this thing mechanism. Yeah.
Yes,
sorry.
coming to that.
Go on. Sorry.
No, so WhatsApp opened with the Association of International Fact Checkers. It opened a helpline for fact checking. There are also other fact checking services which are available across India, which basically so News Mobile is one. Run by a chap called Saurabh Shukla. Then SM Hoax Layer, social media hoax layer is there. So there are various kinds of, internationally there is Snopes.com. There are many of these fact-checking sites which basically take an image and see if it was used in some other context, where was this original image from, whether it has been modified. And there are technical measures to find tampering. I'll slightly talk technical here. So let's see, if I take an image and do some photoshopping in it, it may look genuine. But when I subject to something called ELA, error level analysis, then there are mathematical algorithms which basically transparently tell you that this is the added part and this is the original part. Not only that, you can in some way as to find out with timestamps as to how this has been done with forensics. So forensics during investigation would play a very important role. And thankfully, our capabilities have increased in cyber forensics. But while this happens, fact checking reaches slow. So, like truth reaches slow and falsehood travels fast. So, by the time fact checkers check, there's a time frame. Within that, this thing has already been distributed. It goes through echo chambers. It goes through trusted sources. So, your own sister, brother, mama, mousy is forwarding it to you. And you find that it has come from a trusted source, and then your guards are down and you start believing such things. So there has to be some modicum of awareness, and I think some personal diligence which needs to be exercised in this regard. What do you say about that?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree on this, that there has to be some mechanism that, you personally check, because you do have laws to save yourself. You do have laws which can put you behind the bars, which can, lend you, which can have a jail term against you. So in order to safeguard yourself or avoid getting in trouble, one should make sure, because we're too tempted to, forward any kind of so-called authority letter or so-called infographic or a picture message which comes to us. We love forwarding that or sharing it, and telling it to people. And that's always, there's something, some masala into it which attracts, because as you rightly said, social engineering uh, is the key over here. They do play on that part of, they do understand your emotions, they do understand what need or what not, and after that it is being, there's a lot of stuff, I think, analysis done by these criminals before creating such things. So yes, one has to check. Fact checking is absolutely right from your end. I would say that even if you don't want to get into that, simply Google it nowadays. With the way it has been going on, stop yourself. I mean, hold on a little before forwarding or spreading it. Do have a cross check, Google about it, whether it's authentic or not. uh, I would suggest that even the traditional media should look into it, and also keep on talking about that this is something which is there, which is not, as an, or on an urgency if it spreads, because it actually creates a havoc. It's not just some anti-religious or against the authority kind of news coming in place, but there have been a lot of news as to a cure which made people really ill. Not in India but abroad. So there have been a lot of penalties all over the world when it comes to. It's not just India who's fighting against fake news or misinformation which has been spread. It's all over. Taiwan goes as to very heavy penalty if any fake news is being spread. Uh, Same as with Morocco. Same as with US. Same as with UK. So yes,
In
there are
Singapore also.
yeah, Singapore has they even got a anti fake news bill which was there, and there was a lot of, obviously, human rights activists which did talk about, the privacy activists which did halt it. But yeah, they have dedicated uh, act which deals with uh, fake news. But even if we don't have dedicated, we do have sections, as I rightly said, that IT Act and IPC, which specifically provides for punishment. So just because 66A is gone, please do not spread, because there are a lot of other things which might create problem which you do not understand. So my personal view is, please check.
So I feel that when you are talking of personal diligence, I think personal diligence is also required while you deal with these technological devices. So we've scared people enough, but we should also give them some advice on how to protect themselves. So I feel that first of all, any site which you don't normally visit, please don't visit. Any site which has the theme Corona, COVID, probably be careful of that. There's been a surge in domain registrations, and your virus engines may not have still caught it. Apart from that, anything, if it is too good to be true, some rebate or any kind of money being offered to you. See, anything which puts you in an emotional state of fear, alarm, sort of social validation. So these are the hooks which are used for social engineering by these cyber criminals. That in the context of Corona, if you find that a relative of yours is ill, right? So they would prey upon it. They would hack the relative's account or make an account like that and give you information that, okay, I need money, send me money here. Similarly, many such things are highly contextually used, wherein the theme of Corona is used. So you have to be extremely careful. Basic cyber hygiene is important. So harden your home networks, because now you're working from home. Harden your home networks, change passwords, put long passphrases. Remember your favorite song, pura ka pura song, put it as password. It's called a passphrase.
Mix 2-3 songs ka line.
and make it alphanumeric. So it would not be possible for any kind of automated attacks to steal that password. Apart from that, separate your home and work computers. Using your home computers may not have that kind of device hardening, mobile device management, bring your own device, kind of technological measures. So keep a separate computer for your work, because it may happen that your home computer may be infected, and that particular malware may travel to your corporate infrastructure. In a very strange case, there was a CEO who was handling something very important. So they got into his son's computer and from his son's computer, they just waited for the son to use a common USB drive, and once he used the USB drive in the father's computer, then the whole infrastructure was affected and came down. It's also seen that the attacker is normally 2 to 3 months already sitting on important infrastructures, if at all it is detected. So basic cyber hygiene: patch and upgrade your systems. Look closely for any kind of upgrade coming, both for your apps. Let's say the app we are talking about, after hue and cry about various security features, they have been upgrading it. And recently there was an update which took care of a lot of security features, like being able to lock the meetings or password enable it, or allow a waiting room feature, or allow people to be kicked out of the meeting, so on and so forth, disable screen sharing. So these new updates contain various kinds of configuration features. They contain various kind of hardening aspects. If you've been using a Mac, so in last 15 days there have been 2 updates on the Mac OS operating system. Your phones are continuously getting updates and upgrades on your apps as well as the operating system. Please do that. You magically believe that your phone is free of any viruses. Please purchase an antivirus for your phone also, because it's actually a better processor than your laptop, and it has much more information. It has your personal information, your personal photos, all your locational history. Do an experiment. Go to myactivity.google.com and find out where all you have been in the last few
Just
months.
yours, nobody else's.
Nobody. You have access only to yours. You don't have access to somebody else's. But see, in a domestic situation, it can be different, that people use similar accounts, and with the last login or a saved password from the browser, somebody from home who may be interested in your privacy can, or for a legal reason, can get into your account. And there's something called Google Takeout. So you can actually download a dump of your GPS data, which is very granular, and actually find out minute by minute where you were. So these are scary scenarios. We use technology, but a lot of diligence while using technology is required. Don't click on links. If you find any suspicious files, put it on VirusTotal. See, VirusTotal is an aggregated sum of 69 virus engines, services. So you can basically put any file there, and it will tell whether it's malicious or not. If you get a threatening email or something, just copy the text of that email, put it on Google, and you'll be surprised that there's no need to fear, because people have been getting a mail like this: hey, my name is so and so, I know all your passwords, you've been browsing these and these sites. So many people call up and ask us that, oh, I have received this kind of thing, what do I do? So these are basic things which you can do. Patch, harden, upgrade your system. Don't install apps or programs from untrusted sources. Use long passphrases. Wherever possible, use two-factor or multi-factor authentication. These all would protect you, your family, your reputation, and a diligence regarding fake news. You can check the images. There's a Google reverse image search, so you can put image as a search, and it would tell you where the image had come from. Or any kind of news, you can go and fact check. So these are basic hygiene measures which basically would save you from any kind of increased cyber threats during pandemic. You wanted to say something?
No, I'm saying, so it's good to be skeptical, like extremely skeptical at this time. And I would say that in case any of these things happen, yes, there are laws.
And lawyers.
Don't get scared. Don't get scared. I mean, I would say that the basic thing that this time comes is you feel that no, I should not go to the police, or nothing happens in these kind of cases. And so I think please take care of that first information which you get it, and keep storing. I think we should take questions now.
Yes.
Great. Khushbu, one of the highest voted questions is, one of my friends has recently discovered that someone used her pictures from Instagram to create a fake web page alleging that she indulges in catering to escort services. How can we take the web page down?
The first thing you do is take the entire page, take a screenshot, URL also, download everything of there. You might take help of cybersecurity expert if it's possible for you to safeguard whatever you are wanting to take it down or go against it. Take all of it, go to the nearest police station or the cyber cell. You do have, I think Ministry of Women has also got some website. dedicated for women-related crime against women and children. You can do it there, or you can go to the nearest police station of yours, and or the cyber police station. I think almost maximum police stations have dedicated cyber cell nowadays. You can provide all of it and request for them, because I practically see there's one way. There is, I think, Facebook, Instagram, all of them have personal also, that you can go and say that this is not right, and you can provide them details over there. But if that takes time, at the same time, you should file a complaint over there, and then from LEA, if any of the notices go over there for taking it down, or to have, who's behind it, it would be taken down immediately, and at the same time you might know that who's the one, who's the perpetrator exactly over there. Really a punishable offense, both the things. There are a lot of mechanism one can know. Don't be thinking that you would not know about it, because when they download, even Instagram helps you. There have been one case I'll just narrate over there, very small one, where something similar like that had happened, and they were very scared that it's. Then I kept on asking, are they real pictures? They said no. I said, can you tell me from where they were picked up? So they said that yes, they were picked up from Instagram. One of the, let's say, Instagram. So contacted Instagram. LES got exactly an information, to an extent that if it's related, let's say from 15th April to 17th April was the time I uploaded this picture of mine, just to know more of, the entire analysis over who actually browsed and who actually saved. So there's something called as, whenever you save anybody's profile, miss a picture, or how much time you stay over, that footprint is also available with these platforms. So they told about that, okay, these are the one. Then we narrowed it down. It was being narrowed down from the police, that okay, these are the 10 people, and then it came to an extent that was husband's, basically one of the old colleague, where there was a lot of spat, and then it was being solved. So I think should not be much of a difficulty. Just safeguard whatever you want to go against, because the moment you complain, a lot of times they delete those platforms. So
Also, cybercrime.gov.in, you can report on
yes,
cybercrime.gov.in.
absolutely. This, I think everybody should take it down, that cybercrime.gov.in it's been working really amazing in that.
And anonymous reporting is also possible there. If you don't want to reveal your identity, you can report it anonymously also. They are also very stringent about cases related to women and children. In fact, under the Nirbhaya funds, every state was given a sum of 4 crore rupees to have a lab and a training institution specifically catering to cybercrime against women. So each of the state has, under the Nirbhaya funds, created cyber forensic and investigatory mechanism to deal with cybercrime against women. Please continue.
The next question is, will those users of internet protected who themselves download some content from some site which is ultimately a crime? So what will be scenario in that case? Because lots of softwares and other content are available. I want to know legal implications.
So you're talking of pirated content, or you're talking of content which is, there are different kind of infringements happening here. If it is just a pirated content, then you may max be subjected to copyright laws and other things. But it is, let's say, general pornography, then probably viewing of general pornography is not crime, but transmission is a crime. But if you look at enhanced sections like child porn, then even storing child porn and uploading child porn or transmitting it are enhanced, or being an original creator of child porn are enhanced punishments. So it depends on what the original crime or what is the section which is attracted. So the material would basically specify as to what you're doing. If there's a software crack, then there may be specific sections for that. And if it is something of personal nature, which is relating to either defamation or which touches national security, then bring liability to you. Or if it's a trade secret, or if it is business secret, then those particular aspects would apply.
The next question is, could you please suggest some reference material like books or manuals that will help us understand the practical aspects of cybersecurity so we can protect ourselves and people around us?
So there is an organization called NIST, NIST. I think it's called National Institute for Standards in Technology, which is one of the oldest US institutes, which basically creates all of the manuals and standards which are required for cybersecurity. But see, for a beginner, you can simply start going on YouTube. It has a lot of material in Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, where people have explained simple things to people. Simple things like how to enable privacy settings on your Facebook account, right? These have been explained step by step with screenshots, with screen grabs. So the internet is a great place to learn. Simply Google it, you'll get enough and more material there.
So one more question. Is Zoom authentic to use? Which are the other softwares available?
You know, it uses a simple technology called WebRTC or a video bridge. Uh, this in the sense that they have taken a lot of measures. So in fact, you can go to Zoom website and check their privacy measures and the kind of policies they have about what they do with your data, what kind of encryption they are using, uh, you know, what happens in case of a breach, what are the flaws which they have patched. So I feel that this is a highly popular platform, but there are enough and more video conferencing applications available. But somehow this has been used by corporates, and in the lockdown, this has now populated to public use also. Recently, you saw that there was an app called House Party, which was being used, which also transmitted video. So transmission of videos on a video bridge, say video bridge is something like this, that everybody is transmitting, and then you can collate and see which videos you want. So it's actually not an authentic, you know, two-way communication. This app is good, practical. It has had security flaws which have been taken care of. In fact, our next article is on aspects of, you know, to Zoom or not, and we will be answering these questions in great detail, right from a deep technical analysis of the source code to whether, you know, this data is being used somewhere or not, or what is the exact kind of encryption which is being used by this app, and what kind of permission this app takes when it is installed on your phone. But I think as of now, don't do anything. Look at advisories. FBI has issued an advisory. The Ministry of Home Affairs has issued an advisory. Google this, you'll find them, about use of teleconferencing and Zoom on for your work. So if you have anything which is really critical, I think not a very good idea to you know, take it on a platform about whose security you may not be very sure of. Yeah, please.
There is a rule that zero FIR can be filed from anywhere if crime took place on the web or the internet. Police still insist on filing FIR from local police station only. Why is that? Can we educate police departments more on cyber attacks, investigation procedure, and for filing?
See, in criminal law, there is no question of locus standi. It is the first information report. There is no question of, you know, a first complaint report. FIR does not, if you read 154 closely, it does not require, and subsequent judgments also, you don't require a complainant to be there. Police station can suo motu take cognizance and set the ball in motion. So the filing of FIR does not require for you to either have a victim. It just requires that a cognizable information of a cognizable offense should be communicated to police. Now, the irony is that then it creates, let us say, if you register offenses, it creates practical jurisdictional issues. Because ultimately you will have to submit it in a local court. You can investigate it anywhere. There's no problem. A case can be investigated anywhere. But when you submit the charge sheet, you will have to submit the charge sheet in a court having local jurisdiction. And that is where the issues start. That is why police always insists that, you know, something should be filed in the local jurisdiction. This becomes complicated with cybercrime because there is jurisdictional arbitrage. You don't know where the person is. You don't know the authenticity of that person. You don't know where that data is. And this all may actually be in several countries. So let us say if you're using a popular social media platform, one server is in Ireland, other server is somewhere else, and they are storing some content somewhere, and their legal request goes somewhere else. And they may have an officer in India who may or may not decide to respond to your legal or law enforcement request. But as regards filing of FIRs is concerned, I think law enforcement should accept. But this is a new field. A lot of training is being given, capability and capacity both. So capability is one thing and capacity is another thing. With the spate of cybercrimes, I think the number of cybercrimes has risen so much that if we actually start registering every cybercrime, then you would have nothing else left to do, and you would just be, registering and investigating cybercrimes. You also have to understand that police in India on the side of resources, it is constrained. Um, as a developing country, we are constrained with resources, and disproportionately, you cannot put resources in a particular field, because there probably are 191 other kinds of laws and sections which the police is implementing on a daily basis. So when we look at a specific thing, I agree that there are gaps, but I also see that there's a lot of movement, especially again and again, at the cost of repeating, we've been talking about cybercrime.gov.in. This mechanism has worked very well. It's been active for the last 2-3 years. It's been run by Ministry of Home Affairs in Delhi. They have a very stringent timeline. Once they find where the complaint is from, where either the perpetrator or victim, they send it to that jurisdiction, and the Union Home Ministry from Delhi follows it up case by case. So there is a lot of development, but I think there are gaps which need to be filled up.
There is one question which a lot of people are facing. Emails and SMS stating income tax refund from the department. When you open the link or the message, it takes you to some other portal. How do you check the authenticity and veracity of it?
So 2-3 things. One, that, be very careful of any link, because, tax departments don't send you SMSs like that. With links, and with link shortening services .bit.ly, you have these link shorteners, bit.ly. What you can do is you can copy this, don't click it, copy this, and there are URL expanding services. You can go and put it back in the URL. Similarly, and type the name yourselves. Don't, click on that link, because clicking so this is exactly what phishing is that it serves you a link, and if you click on that link, it takes you to a facsimile, a very similar looking website, a replica website, which takes your credentials and then also redirects you seamlessly back to the original website. So you don't even know that you have been conned. Be very careful of any links that come in your mails or in your messages. Try to hover your cursor on that, and when you hover the cursor, it actually sometimes there would be another name given. Let us say incometax.com. Or incometax.in, but if you hover your cursor on that, the actual link is shown. You can actually copy this link, right click, copy this link and paste it, and then see whether it is actually taking you to a legit website or not. Be skeptical. Do not generally download anything. Do not generally click anything.
That .gov.in is something nobody can buy as a domain name. There's a restriction. If you want to buy anything, that is restricted. There are a lot of domain names like the suffix which are being restricted by the government, level 1, level 2, level 3, and defense specific. They are something which you and me or any other people cannot buy. So these people have been these miscreants have been really smart. What they do is, like, for example, there's a website which say that Maharashtra.gov.in. So they would say that dot will go, and that would be Maharashtra Gov, .in. So one has to understand that pointers also. 90% of these websites, government websites, because you click and you don't understand that the dot comes over here, the exact thing is .gov.in. So they remove that dot, and gov is what they put it over here, and it just becomes .in. So look at those little things out there. There's always bound to be a spelling mistake. There is always bound to be different type of font which is being used, because they are always made in a very hurriedly, and it's bound to be some kind of discrepancies around, or these dots and all these things. Please do cross check. I mean, my personal view over here is double check. Yes, you should do it. At the same time, do not at this time, and in otherwise also, do not venture out as to click on any other websites. Restrict yourself when it comes to COVID related information. Restrict yourself to very limited or verified official handles for these informations, because this is the time actually it's been used. It's rampant. There has been 350% increase in domain registrations. There has been double the increase of the internet time has the screen time of people have increased exponentially, or double maybe. So with that, absolutely, they actually it's actually a free space for all these antisocial elements, or where cybercrime is concerned. looking at health side, looking at any side, banking, health, personal information. They might not use it today and you will not even know, but that can be used at the later stage when, my all your entire personal information by 3 different sources, if I collect, I can club that together, being a anti-social element, and I can use that at the later stage, not today. Complain at that nearest police station of yours, you can write an email. You can directly write an email to certain also, because certain looks into it, and they do verify and they do investigate in that aspect. And yeah, I think that's
Yeah. So there's a very smart kind of attack which is called homomorphic attack. So Russian characters or German characters have very similar kind of O and
zero.
E. Yeah, zero. So
Okay.
which can be so for gov.in they would say G0 V dot 1N, right? So this is called homomorphic attack. So very similar looking alphabet, sometimes from a different language is used. See, I'll tell you how to check. So you can copy this whole URL and paste it in VirusTotal. There are services like VirusTotal where you can actually check these, and they would tell you whether this site is malicious or not.
Okay. The next question, again, COVID related. When patients have to be traced, how would the principles of privacy apply? Will that be waived off? Can state waive privacy of patients in the larger public interest? And related to it is the Arogya Setu app.
Okay.
Whether it misuses the data as we allow the Bluetooth and the location, is it safe to install?
I would say it's absolutely safe. I'll start with that. Now, when we talk about privacy, what you're talking about, I think thode time tak we all never knew what exactly privacy is, thanks to Aadhaar. Let's differentiate between private entity and public state. State is doing things for a specific purpose, which is benefit. And the situation we are in as of now, that's pandemic, I think every measure can be taken. But yeah, one has to keep in place the exact safeguard. And as I said also, that there has to be a proportion and there has to be a mechanism that they are being used for the purpose they are taken for. And I think we should not have a problem. I think all of us must be on Facebook. And if you go and look at the privacy settings of Facebook and the sharing part, it has even changed during this pandemic to an extent that it will, even if you don't have WhatsApp related you have not downloaded, or there are other apps, even if you have not downloaded Facebook app on your phone, even if you're searching 10 different websites, they would collect your data from there, or they would share data, cross link. Anything you browse on would be the one which they will keep it as there. And there's a place where you can check also that what exactly are the things you have browsed or you have bought, or at what time you have bought it, and everything in that regard. And you have an option of deleting it, that do not track that, you do not use that, but also do not use it as to do not show it over here or cross link it. But they again keep a right that we're going to use it for our internal purposes and other optimal usage, whatever we have to do, it might not publish it over here. So I say that, and it's not just Facebook, it's almost every app you use is the one who are actually living on your data. Data is the key when it comes to whatever you're getting free over internet, be it any kind of a application you use, Face app or whatever, XYZ. So I say when it comes to a state as it is has all your data. I mean, one should not worry about, state having my data. They have your data, and they have to know that how 10 people are over here and what has to done so that they can implement something. That's my personal view over here. But when we talk about legally, yes, they can. There is an option of, you do have right to health as your one of your fundamental right, as you have right to privacy as your fundamental right, in the same right, which is right to life. So when you have a right to health, when even your UN conventions, a lot of conventions do talk about right to health as one of the fundamental right, and a state has a duty to protect it. And if it fails, even at an international level, some actions can be taken.
That was the last question for today. We'd like to thank Sir Brijesh Singh as well as Khushbu for a very interesting and very enlightening entire webinar.